Something about this gospel you need to know, a little bit of context. When we place it in Matthew's narrative, Matthew's gospel text, it highlights even more what's going on. Because this, if you look at the chapter heading where it is, this is just a little bit before Jesus enters into that part of Matthew's gospel we call the Passion narrative. That portion of the gospel that we read already this year, earlier this year, on a Sunday we call Palm Sunday. That Sunday when we recall how Jesus entered Jerusalem and was extolled by the people. They threw their cloaks on the ground and called him the Son of David. They wanted to make him the king. And so the authorities in the temple, the religious leaders, are questioning him now. They're saying, how can you say and do all these things that you're doing? Under whose authority are you doing all of these things? And Jesus is giving them kind of a smart alecky answer. You can just imagine what they're thinking behind the scenes. Even so, he gave them this answer, and they're being the consummate politicians. They're being what a teacher of mine some time ago called mugwumps. They're sitting on the fence with their mug on one side and their wump on the other, not wanting to take a stand because, as they said, we say one thing, we're in trouble on one side, and if we say the other, we're in trouble on the other. And so they answer Jesus, I don't know. You can just imagine, once the scene was all over with, they repaired to their own precincts, and the plots began. The plots began in earnest. This one has to go. Even while they were questioning his authority and where he got his authority. It's kind of like asking in this day and age, like, where did you go to seminary? Where are your degrees from? What bishop ordained you? Who gave you the authority to say the things that you're saying? And Jesus, in turn, says, well, I'll tell you if you give me this answer. And they couldn't answer the question that he put to them because he basically called them out. Called them out on who they thought they were. Tricked them in a way. And so they repaired, as I mentioned, and decided, that's enough of this. He's making fools of us. And people with power do not like that. And so the gospel story would continue. We would continue reading. And soon we would know and see Jesus being betrayed and suffering and dying on a cross. So we can ask the question then, where does Jesus get this authority? What school did he go to? What degrees does he have? What kind of expertise? Well, we all know. But the difference here is that he is speaking with a certain kind of authority. And the word that is used for authority in the scriptures here is a word that is of particular interest to me, because the word in the Greek language that is being used by Matthew is exousia. Now, unless you're a Greek scholar, it means absolutely nothing to you. Probably didn't mean a whole lot to me either when I first learned it, except back in the days when I was studying philosophy, it's talking about, the root of the word is ousia. And ousia is an Aristotelian concept. It means substance. So exousia means out of the substance of something. And you begin to understand that when we're talking about authority, we're not talking about somebody giving power to somebody. Jesus is teaching with authority. Actually, Matthew uses this term early on in his gospel when the people of his own town say, wow, this one teaches with authority, not like the scribes and the Pharisees. In other words, he's not teaching out of a book someplace. He's not teaching out of what someone else says and just relating it to it. He's teaching, we might say, from the heart, out of the substance of who he is. So he's relating all of this with what we might say authenticity. That what he's saying and doing is authentic. That people are seeing it and they're coming to believe it because it's real. That's what this word authority means. That it's real. So they're saying, where are you getting this from? We can't teach that way. We need to read it in a book someplace. We need to get it out of some class somewhere. But you seem to have it all on your own. In the church, we call this the teaching of the Spirit. This is something that comes to us, we call it inspiration. It's something that comes to us from the divine person. Oh, we can articulate it in books. We can study it. But there's a certain thing about it that when someone talks about it, we can tell whether it's real or not. More often than not, about the way they speak it, but more importantly, about the way they live it. That's really the key, the way they live it. And that's why today, for us to consider this particular gospel is very important for us to go back and to think about what St. Paul is writing to the church at Philippi. When he writes out this beautiful, it is a hymn actually, it was a hymn that was used by the early Christians, when he introduces it by saying, your attitude, your mindset, your vision must be that of Christ, the one who was God, but did not deem equality with God something to be grasped at, something to be held on to, something to be exploited, but emptied himself and took the form of a slave, being born in human likeness, and being found in human form, gave up himself even to death on a cross. He's saying that that must be our attitude. That must be our mindset. Now, very few of us want to go around looking for death. Very few of us want to go around looking for the kind of punishment that Jesus underwent because of what he just did to these religious leaders of his day. None of us wants to suffer the way that Jesus did. It's true. But St. Paul is saying that that must be your attitude. That you constantly are willing to give up yourself. That's what he's talking about. That you don't hold on to things in such a way that you hold on to your ego. That you hold on to this sense of self. That it becomes the most important thing in your life. That your sense of who you are is the most important thing to you. But that you gradually, day by day by day, act in such a way that you give it away. And what Jesus teaches us all through the gospel, and what gives him this authority, This substance that he is this reality that we call love. It's giving up ourselves continually to another, day by day, in incremental little bits, giving ourselves away to someone else, whether it is someone important to us in our lives or even a stranger on the street, that we are willing to give something away. So much so that eventually it becomes a pattern of our life. Will we do it utterly like Jesus? Ever in our life? Probably not. But you see, we can never attain to that perfect gift of love that Jesus had on the cross. Can we? No. Paul teaches us too that we all fall short of the glory of God. But indeed we do. But the moment that we do is our last moment in this world. Following the pattern of Jesus, we look at the cross, and when Jesus says, as he does in John's Gospel, "It is finished," and he breathes his last as he says, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." We breathe our last. We must be willing, finally, not to hold on to our life in this world, to grasp at it. That's what this language is. It says to be exploited in our translation, but this grasping sense that we can't let go, we just can't let it go. No. We must be willing to let it go, to give it to God, back to God. The God who gave us life, we finally have to be willing to give it back to God in that last moment of our life. And this is the mystery. That if we finally find that reality in our lives, that we are willing to let it go by the pattern of our life, and in that last moment we give it back to God, whole and entire, the mystery is that God finally gives it back to us. That's the mystery of the resurrection. That if we make it the pattern of our life, that in our love for one another, we constantly are giving up of ourselves. When we get to that last moment, that last breath, and we say, "Here, God, here I am, take it, finally, take it." And God receives us. The mystery is that God will give it back to us. But he just doesn't give us the life that we had. He gives it back to us changed and transformed, transfigured and glorious. That's what he did to Jesus. When Jesus says, "Father, it is finished. Receive my spirit, my breath." And then he is buried. And on the third day he is risen, changed, transformed, transfigured. That is the promise for you and for me. But we can only get there if we have the attitude of Christ, St. Paul said. That we make our substance, who we are in the depths of our heart, in the very body in which we live, the kind of life that we constantly are giving up of ourselves to one another. That we don't hold on, we don't grasp on, we don't exploit it, but that we give it up constantly, incrementally, step by step, day by day, bit by bit. And as we do, we discover that it's restored to us in glory. That's the mystery. That what we give away is never lost. Friends, we come here to learn the way of Jesus. We come here to learn the way of love. We come here to share the body and the blood. We come here to remember what Jesus has done. We come here to take it to ourselves, not to hold on to it for dear life, but to give it away so that others may know. We come here to be changed and transformed into the loving children of God, so that the world may know that we are loved, that we are changed, and that God will let us live forever. Changed, risen, glorified. Will you answer Jesus? What authority do you teach with? Is it with the authority of others or with your heart? How will you answer?